Welcome to the weekly market roundup brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff. We've got a great cast today. We've got Heather Ramsey joining us, as well as Austin Schroeder. I'm Steve White on location behind the scenes at the Nebraska State Fair. In case you wondered, yes, sometimes I do have to get away, and that's why we put the curtains up so I can try to get a little work done. And it is the end of the month. It is a holiday weekend, and we've got a lot of different thoughts we're going to get to about the markets and where things stand as we are on this Labor Day weekend. We'll get to all of that right after this message from the Nebraska Soybean Board.
It may be small, but this little bean fuels a lot of power. It powers a food industry as a top source of protein. It's a fuel that powers diesel engines with fewer emissions. It powers a state economy and bottom lines, and it powers the rest of the world as a top Nebraska export. Yeah, it may be small, but we're finding more ways for this little bean to power Nebraska.
Welcome back to the weekly market roundup. We're kicking things off, and Heather, as we say, it is the end of August. It is also a holiday weekend, and as we kind of take a look at the month, we're kind of shifting into September now. As you look at kind of the range of things, what jumps out at you as we're putting the close on August of 2025?
You know, I think one of the most interesting things about where we end the month is December corn futures. This month, we digested private analyst expectations. We digested a USDA number for national corn yield. Multiple times we've heard and had the market trade and digest a 188.8 actually national average. And so that number alone makes you think we should be well under $4 futes. And somehow this month we managed to trade some lows, but then come back and settle out above this $4 futures mark. The range on December futures this month from 392 futes up to 419. And that 419 actually put in here today on the last trading day of the month. We've actually seen closes increase. So the closing price, it looks like we're going to be somewhere about 7 cents better at the end of the month than where we started the month. And so when you think about where that national yield average expectation is at, it's kind of surprising to jump our expectations from being around a 183-ish number up to 188 during this month, and then seeing still a better close by the end of the month. So that's a little bit interesting. You know, soybeans have a really interesting range as well. They were sitting 981 lows, highs of 1062 this month. So just big ranges in general for soybeans for the month of August. And that one has been a little bit surprising, I think, to some.
Yeah, Austin, as we take a look at those numbers, any of those numbers or anything from the month of August jump out to you? As we said, the 188.8 number has gotten a lot of attention, but what are you going to remember about August 2025 here, Austin?
Yeah, well, I think the thing you're going to remember is you kind of put the low in on the day that you had that billion bushels added to that balance sheet, right? You had not only the 188.8, you had the 2 million acres of increase in planted acres added. And so you kind of had some unexpected things happen. But, you know, again, the market's kind of digested some of that. I think when you look at the weather throughout August, you're probably taking a little bit off of that 188. So I think we're obviously trading a little bit below that. You look at some of the disease issues, and we're factoring in some of that as well on the corn. You know, over on the bean side, again, factoring in that August weather. Kind of a repeat of last year, right? You had a normal, or I guess a decent growing season, and you kind of rounded out the end of the growing season in August a little on the drier side, especially over in the Eastern Corn Belt, and you kind of had some lower yields show up finally once we got to that January report. It took USDA a little time to get there. But we did have some yield issues. So, you know, I think the pod counts are pretty big this year. So I think some of that yield loss may be limited. But when you factor in that it's been dry in August, especially on the bean side, you know, I think you're going to see some of those production numbers come down moving forward. That's given the market, you know, a little bit of support. But again, I think you look at some of the trade issues we've had on the beans and lack of sales. And so I think that's kind of capping some of the strength we've had here.
Very interesting. Heather, I want to ask you, we're at a holiday weekend, Labor Day weekend. Do weekends like this and holidays like this, does that have any impact on markets, just generally, and in this one in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they do. And I always think as well, if you've got a holiday that piggybacks on a month end, And then also on an expiration of a reference month, those always seem to be a little bit more movement than maybe people were expecting. The September board first notice day is happening. We have the ending of the month of August going on, as well as in a holiday for the first trading day in what should be the first trading day in September. We're seeing a lot of the funds liquidate some positions, taking risk off the table there. Some long soybean, short corn bets had kind of been made earlier this month, and we're seeing that unwind here. So when I talk about that with farmers, I try to make it as clear as possible. If they're currently short corn and long beans and they're offsetting, they're obviously taking the opposite position. So if you see a bunch of funds liquidating positions on a short corn, that means that they're buying it back. Thus, we see the positive movement in corn. And if they're doing that same thing on the bean position that they had been long, they're selling it back. So I try to just get that as clear as possible in my farmers' heads so that when they're thinking, well, if they're liquidating positions, why are we up on corn? That's why they're actually taking a buy side here today. They put some strength in that market for 2 days now. So that's kind of what's been moving us, I think, the last 2 days on corn. That has been a significant headline, unfortunately. Just funds cleaning up positions and taking risk off the table has actually been a market mover and a significant headline for the last couple of days of the trading session for August.
Yeah. Austin, anything to add to that as we talk about the fact that it's the end of the month, but also a holiday weekend?
Yeah, you're going to have that holiday weekend here. So, we're trading around that, and we've had some of that short covering, as Heather mentioned there. So you're getting some of that short covering now from a technical standpoint. You do have some targets a little bit higher on specifically December corn. There's that gap from the July 4th holiday at around 432 and change. And then there's also even some short-term head and shoulders bottoms on that chart that point to 425, 426 area too. So there are some technical targets that you can maybe shoot for if we can extend some of that short covering here.
Austin, I also wanted to ask you just generally soybeans and the strength that we're seeing. What do you make of where things are looking right now on the beans?
Yeah, over on the bean side, again, we're looking good. We've had some of that drier August weather that's gave us a pretty good floor here under that market, as well as that 80 million acre number that we saw back in August. We're a little slow in terms of that export business. You look at China; they haven't bought anything. We're about a month behind of when they kind of started to come in and buy last year, right? We saw a similar pattern with that large Brazilian crop. And so they are delayed last year. They're delayed even further this year. So, I think the market's limiting the upside due to that. I think they're hesitant to sell the market just based off of that, considering we have had some decent sales here. We're still below last year, but if you look at every other destination other than China, we're still looking pretty good, like 3-4 year high, excluding those Chinese sales. So for this given week anyway. So I think moving forward, if you're looking late September and we still haven't had China come in, I think that's maybe a cause for concern. But for right now, I think it's limiting the upside on the beans, but not necessarily a reason to see selling.
Yeah, Heather, I'd be curious for your thoughts on that too. There's so much talk about will China buy some beans, but just big picture, I mean, we've seen some export sales, haven't we?
Yeah, I would agree that, we definitely like having China be a buyer of soybeans. That volume is important, but underneath kind of everything going on, we've quietly picked up about the second highest non-China sales to date for like mid-August, essentially, that we've had since, probably 10 years. It should be second highest non-Chinese sales in 10 years when you look at the export numbers. And so those other countries that we have partnerships with have come to the table and in a larger volume and quicker, a faster pace for this time of year. Now, does that mean that's going to, stand the test of time for the entire export year? Nobody knows. It just means that we've got some better relationships and better sales on right now versus what was expected. I do think having this volume open to sell that China has not purchased. I mean, clearly we're working towards finding a home for those bushels elsewhere. At some point, I think there'll be something get sold. It's just whether it's what people want it to be or not. we do have an advantage here. The U.S. bean and the Argentinian bean are definitely similar from that drier moisture content. That's a storable bean. And so at some point I think we'll see something. I think we'll see some sales just around the fact that China likes to put beans in stocks so that they have that storage capacity to then sell off when it does get to be a little bit of a crunch time and people need beans. So, things will come. But right now, the non-China sales are a really good number for soybeans, and corn still on a fantastic pace as far as exports go.
Yeah, which I think probably would have surprised us if we would have told ourselves that back in spring, because the idea was we're going to have a trade war. We're not going to be able to sell beans. And now we're seeing some record, some really strong bean numbers outside of China. It's just, you never know how it's going to play out, do you?
No.
And Austin, anything else you're kind of keeping an eye on these days? Just, as we're getting closer to harvest, any concerns with, just the quality that especially getting back to the corn, whether or not we hit 188.8, but what's your general sense of how things are shaping up as we're getting awful close to now getting some corn in the bin here?
Yeah, again, I think we're referencing the yield. I think we're probably discounting some of that 188.8. We're probably more in the ball camp of, we're personally in the ball camp around 185 or so, at least given kind of what we know right now. That can obviously subject to change here. But, I think the market definitely is discounting that. You're obviously seeing the short covering involved with that. But, again, I think the other thing to keep an eye on is how much of a disease pressure is noticed here this year. I think that's the other thing. Obviously, the Pro Farmer Crop Tour saw a lot of disease around the country. And so I think that's something else we're going to have to keep an eye on here.
Very good. Well, we're starting to near the end of our time. Heather, let's get one more word from you, and then Austin will wrap things up after that. Heather.
Well, I think you mentioned harvest is coming, Steve, and you're right. I think that this is a world full of a lot of uncontrollable things for the farmer. We talk about markets, and there's just not one thing that a single person can really change. But what you can handle for yourselves is your harvest logistics. Get that planning done. It pays every year to have the planning in place. And where we have cash markets running scared right now, it's going to pay dividends for clients, for farmers to have their harvest basis destinations locked up and know they've got a home for things. The last thing we want is to actually have a decent crop, because this is a decent crop. Let's not beat around the bush. Right. This is a good crop. The worst thing that can happen is you have a good crop and then you're stopped during harvest because you're waiting on an elevator, you're waiting on your own space, your own logistics. Like, just take the 5 minutes to make those plans and it'll pay dividends for sure.
Good practical advice. Austin, anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just say take advantage of the opportunities that the market's going to give you here. Don't let something get a short covering rally or something like that and let it pass you by or whatnot. But just have some thoughts on your marketing plans and move forward with that.
Well, very good. Appreciate both of you joining us. That is Heather Ramsey and Austin Schroeder joining us on the weekly Market Roundup, brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff.